Assalamu alaikum and welcome. Your mic is not on yet, Dr. Jamillah. You have to click the thing on top of your head. Oh wait, maybe there. Oops, we're getting feedback. I'm going to introduce you, and then we'll turn your mic on. How's
okay.
That? Oh, there you. Actually, it's on now.
Okay.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, so welcome everyone and good morning. Welcome to our monthly open halaqa. It's once a month on the second, usually it's on the second Saturday of every month at 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturday CST. But we have a special day and a special time this month because we have a special guest speaker. And so we wanted to accommodate to the time that she could make it. And admin, could you mute Dr. Karim just for a moment so that the audience doesn't get feedback while I'm introducing her? Thank you. Okay, so we are really honored and grateful to you, Dr. Karim, for joining us this morning, taking time out of your schedule. The purpose of this monthly open halaqa is really to open up the opportunity to people to learn and grow. And we really feel and felt that it's very important in February to help people learn and grow on the path of Black History Month and the different points of education that can be addressed. And so without further ado, I'm going to read your bio and then I have some personal things to say too. Okay, so Dr. Jamillah Karim is an award-winning author, speaker, and blogger. She specializes in race, gender, and Islam in America. Dr. Jamillah is author of Women of the Nation Between Black Protests and Sunni Islam with Dawn Marie Gibson, and American Muslim Women Negotiating Race, Class, and Gender Within the Ummah, which was awarded the 2008 Book Award in Social Sciences by the Association for Asian American Studies. She is currently working on a new book, Radical Love, where she explores the depth and beauty of divine and human love. I can't wait to read that one. Dr. Jamillah blogs for Sapelo Square, Hagar Lives, Race plus Gender plus Faith, New York University Press blog, and Huffington Post Religion. She speaks regularly at college campuses and Muslim conferences across the nation. In 2014, her scholarly activism was recognized by Jet magazine, which featured her as a young faith leader in the African American community. Dr. Jamillah is a former associate professor in the Department of Religious Studies at Spelman College. She holds a BSc in electrical engineering. I want everyone to hear that, in electrical engineering, and a PhD in Islamic Studies from Duke University. And the personal thing I want to say is that some of you know that I am working on my doctorate. And when you're working on your doctorate, it's this really lonely world where you reach out and ask people. Sometimes you're asking people for interviews, sometimes you're asking people for help and all of this. And I have to say that, mashallah, 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 Dr. Jamillah has been more than a colleague, more than a mentor, more than a sister. She has been a vulnerable, open, helpful resource of everything that I could need. And I'm so grateful, and I've learned so much from you. And I'm so honored, really, that you're here this morning to take this space and teach us. So thank you very much for being here. And I'm going to hand the microphone over to you. And alhamdulillah, thank you so much. Bismillah. I'm going to pop off now. Assalamu alaikum.
Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. I'd like to thank Rabata for inviting me to be here today. Thank you, Afidamra, for those very generous comments. And I ask all of you to bear with me. I have cold and my voice is hoarse, as you can see. I'm very happy to be here. So again, I thank you for inviting me to lead your halaqa, Black History Month, honoring and celebrating the legacy. When I think about Black History Month, I think about literature. and poetry in particular, because poetry has the ability to really connect our hearts to the struggle. A defining moment for me in terms of Black History Month and poetry occurred in high school. Here's a slide of my senior class on the New York Times in 1993. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. But the article is about African American Muslims, particularly in the Warthi Muhammad community. And since our school has roots in that community, we were featured. Warthi Muhammad High School is an extension of Sister Clara Muhammad, who is the mother of Imam Warthi Muhammad. So my junior year at Warthi Muhammad High, my English teacher, Sister Sandra El-Amin, had us do a Black poetry project where each of us had to select a poet, do analysis of his or her poetry, and select one poem to memorize and present to the class. So Margaret Walker was the poet that I selected. And I was encouraged, or I should say, I was courageous enough to select her poem, For My People, which is 10 stanzas. It has 10 stanzas. And so I selected that poem and I memorized it and presented it in front of my class, and my teacher loved it. And so then she had me to present it to the entire school in an assembly, and then I presented it to the whole community at a school banquet. So I recited so much that the poem really became a part of me. And so I want to start today by reciting the first 4 stanzas of that poem. I still have it memorized. For my people everywhere, singing their slave songs repeatedly, their dirges and their ditties and their blues and jubilees, praying their prayers nightly to an unknown God, bending their knees humbly to an unseen power. For my people, lending their strength to the years, to the gone years and the now years and the maybe years, washing, ironing, cooking, scrubbing, sewing, mending, hoeing, plowing, digging, planting, pruning, patching, dragging along, never gaining, never reaping, never knowing, and never understanding. For my playmates in the clay and dust and sand of Alabama backyards, playing baptizing and preaching and doctor and jail and soldier and school and mama and cooking and playhouse and concert and store and hair and Miss Chumbi and company. For the cramped, bewildered years we went to school to learn to know the reasons why, and the people who, the reasons why, and the answers to, and the people who, and the places where, and the days when, in memory of the bitter hours when we discovered we were Black and poor and small and different, and nobody cared, and nobody wondered, and nobody understood. I started here with my people because the history of Islam in America is the history of my people. The history of Islam here is a chapter in Black history and one that continues to unfold. Really, you cannot tell the story of Islam in America without imparting the rich African American legacy of struggle that made Islam beautiful and beloved to my people. Also, you cannot fully tell the story of Black history without telling American Muslim history. If you ask me to tell you the personal story of my family, the story of my father, for example, I will tell you the story of the Civil Rights Movement and the story of Islam in America at once. For me, the two are inseparable. My father's great aunt, we called her Aunt Babine, was a student of W.E.B. Du Bois, the great intellectual and champion of African American rights. W.E.B. Du Bois became the first African American to earn a PhD at Harvard University in 1895. He is known for his classic, The Souls of Black Folk, and also for co-founding the NAACP in 1909. When he taught as a professor at the Atlanta University at the beginning of the 20th century, Aunt Babine was among his prized students. Aunt Babine, born in 1885, never married or had children. However, my granny was like a daughter to her. She adopted my granny, my father's mother, when she was orphaned. And so when I came into the world, Aunt Babine was like a great-grandmother who lived with my granny. In her 90s at the time, Aunt Babine was still very active and healthy. She babysat us when we were sick. Again, she was 95 years old when she would babysit us at Granny's house. I remember vividly sitting at my granny's table doing homework and Aunt Babine teaching me how to hold a pencil. And mostly we loved Aunt Babine's fluffy, fresh waffles because back then the milkman delivered the milk to my granny's house. So they were great waffles. And also the butterscotch candy is still one of my favorite flavors because Aunt Babine would always give us one as a treat. So as I grew up, I came to learn that sweet Auntie Babine who gave us sweets wasn't your ordinary auntie. She lived to 106, and she had an elementary school in Atlanta named after her. And now I'll show a very short video that explains why. Please show the video.
She has so many different facets of her life that are important to the Georgia women.
She has so many different facets of her life that are important to the Georgia women.
Dr. Jane Smith, my father's sister. So we learned from the video that my Aunt Babine, or Baseline E. Usher, was a first in two ways. She was the first African American to have an office in Atlanta City Hall as the supervisor of a Negro schools, as they called it at the time. And she also started Girl Scouts for African American girls in the state of Georgia. Here's a picture of my granny and grandpapa in my grandfather's dentist's office. So Aunt Babine raised her niece, Laveda Smith, who was my grandmother. We called her Granny and my grandfather Grandpapa. And my grandparents were members of Atlanta's Black bourgeoisie. As I mentioned, my grandfather was a dentist and my granny was a school teacher. The historymakers.org actually has a biography of my grandfather as well as videos of interviews with him. I just want to read part of the bio they have for him. Harvey Bryant Smith was born October 22nd, 1922 in Atlanta, Georgia. His parents, Baptist Reverend Harvey Miles Smith and Stella Bryant Smith, attended Morehouse College and Spelman College, respectively, and were friends of Reverend A.D. Williams, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's grandfather. Smith grew up in Albany, Georgia. After graduation as a pre-med student at Morehouse College in 1943, Smith entered the United States Army. The Army paid his way through Howard University Dental School, and in 1946, he graduated, was married, and opened a dental practice on Auburn Avenue in Atlanta. Smith's patients included Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and other civil rights leaders. Appointed to the advisory board of the Georgia Dental Association by former United States President, then Governor Jimmy Carter in the late 1970s, Smith sought to encourage opportunities for Black dentists. My grandfather passed away last May. A few months prior, my cousin asked Grandpapa for his thoughts on athletes taking a knee during the national anthem. And this is what he said. My grandpapa said, "I don't like these boys kneeling at games, but I understand. I was in the military. I was a dentist for colored soldiers. But once I had to work on the teeth of a few captains and such because the white dentists weren't going to be back in time for them to ship out. They questioned my degree, called me the N-word while I worked on them. And when we were done, one of those white captains took me outside, had me stand at attention, and peed on my shoes and the bottom of my pants. The other two laughed and told me I had to clean up my uniform or I'd be reprimanded. Well, for the rest of my life, every time I hear the anthem, I think of that day and I get mad. But I stand because I served. But we still have a lot of people, many people of color and others, still getting peed on. So if they have to kneel to get America to have tough talks, then they should kneel." So the historymakers.org bio of my grandfather noted that in 2001, Smith retired and continued to live in the home he bought in 1956. Smith and his wife Laveda had 3 grown children, Jane, Harvey, and Homer. Their oldest son, Harvey, is my father. And this is Granny's house from the outside. We'll see the inside shortly. So I love Granny's house because we could always watch cable TV there. We didn't have cable at my house. And she always served us Coca-Cola products. Fanta, orange, and grape were my favorite, and other treats that grandparents always provide to their grandchildren. The caption in the picture reads, "Home of Dr. Harvey B. Smith from 1956 to 2015, designed by renowned Atlanta architect J.W. Robinson. The custom-built mid-century modern jewel located in the heart of historic Collier Heights boasts the rare flat-top roof, unique T-shape, floor-to-ceiling window, mahogany ceilings, flagstone flooring, and 3 patios. Hands down, Granny's house is my favorite in Atlanta. But apparently, her grandchildren were not the only ones who thought so." Here is a slide of an SCLC benefit concert in Atlanta. Dr. King was the first president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, I believe the last name stands for. And this is a benefit in Atlanta, and you see Dr. King there, and Lena Horne is second right, I believe, holding a bouquet of flowers. I know many of you, not just many of you, maybe because of your generation, may not know Lena Horne, but Lena Horne was a very famous singer and actress that everybody, my generation and earlier, knew of. And she did work in the civil rights movement through her art and her talent. So what does this have to do with Granny's house? So that evening or after the concert, they had a reception for Lena Horne and the guests at Granny's house. So you can see Lena Horne there with the scarf on. She is shaking the hand of my Aunt Jane, who was 16 at the time, and then my granny is there watching admiringly. And all of that is very beautiful and nice. By the way, I asked my aunt, why did they have the reception there? And she answered it was because her house was the talk of the town and it was brand new and beautiful. And so, yes, their house was built from the ground up in 1956. So it's a lovely photo, but what makes it nice, and if this was interactive, I asked, who do you see in the background? But by now you should see Dr. King in the background on the right. I'd like to note that this was a week before the March on Washington, which took place on August 28, 1963. 1963, a very important year in the movement for the reason I just mentioned, but also Another key moment in civil rights this year is Malcolm X's delivery of the speech Message to the Grassroots. And I'm going to read an excerpt of this speech that he read to at the Northern Negro Grassroots Leadership Conference in Detroit. And it's considered to be one of the most important speeches that Malcolm X gave. But before that, let me just make a few comments to introduce. As you know, Malcolm X was the national spokesperson for the Nation of Islam for many years. Historians of the Civil Rights Movement do not categorize the Nation of Islam as part of the mainstream civil rights movement because the Nation of Islam called for separation from whites, while mainstream civil rights organizations were actually working towards integration. Also, we know that nonviolence was a radical strategy of the civil rights organizations, whereas Malcolm X saw violence as an inescapable part of true revolution, as he expresses here in this speech. So an excerpt from Message to the Grassroots. There's been a revolution, a Black revolution going on in Africa. In Kenya, the Mau Mau were revolutionaries. They were the ones who made the word uhuru, Kenyan for freedom. They were the ones who brought it to the fore. The Mau Mau, they were revolutionaries. They believed in scorched earth. They knocked everything aside that got in their way. And their revolution also was based on land, a desire for land. In Algeria, the northern part of Africa, a revolution took place. The Algerians were revolutionists. They wanted land. France offered to let them be integrated into France. They told France to hell with France. They wanted some land, not some France, and they engaged in a bloody battle. So I cite these various revolutions, brothers and sisters, to show you, you don't have a peaceful revolution. You don't have a turn the other cheek revolution. There's no such thing as a nonviolent revolution. The only kind of revolution that's nonviolent is the Negro revolution. The only revolution based on loving your enemy is the Negro revolution. The only revolution in which the goal is desegregated lunch counter, a desegregated theater, a desegregated park, and a desegregated public toilet. You can sit down next to white folks on the toilet. That's no revolution. Revolution is based on land. Land is the basis of all independence. Land is the basis of freedom, justice, and equality. So even though Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King had different approaches, some contemporary historians highlight that they shared a common struggle that necessitated both approaches. For example, in the film Selma, which I hope all of you have seen, if not, you have to see it this Black History Month. So in this film, for instance, there's a scene in which Coretta Scott King meets with Malcolm X. He spoke to Coretta because Dr. King was in jail in Selma. And the message he wanted Coretta to relay to her husband was this: I want you to say to him that I didn't come to Selma to make his job more difficult, but I thought that if the white people understood what the alternative was, that they would be more inclined to listen to your husband. And so that's why I came. So in other words, Malcolm was saying that presenting a more extreme position, whites would be more likely to consider Dr. King's demands. So what did Malcolm X say to the church congregation in Selma a month before they would attempt to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge? He said, I pray that God will bless you in everything that you do. I pray that all the fear that has ever been in your heart will be taken out. And when you look at that man, if you know he's nothing but a coward, you won't fear him. If he wasn't a coward, he wouldn't gang up on you. He wouldn't need to sneak around here. This is how they function. They function in mobs. That's a coward. They put on a sheet so you don't know who they are. That's a coward. No, the time will come when that sheet will be ripped off. If the federal government doesn't take it off, we'll take it off. Malcolm X gave this talk on February 4th, 1965. He was assassinated on February 21st, 1965. On March 7th, 1965, protesters marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge en route to Montgomery and were brutally attacked by the police. That violent day became known as Bloody Sunday. I found this photo in Malcolm's speech at The Root, an online magazine, in a reflection on the 50th anniversary of Malcolm's assassination and the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday. The writer concluded in her piece, "It is clear that the spirit of Malcolm X, his life, his teachings, his assassination, was also stirring on that bridge in Selma on a Bloody Sunday in 1965. It's only right that he be recognized." Some scholars do recognize the tremendous impact that Malcolm and the Nation of Islam had on the Civil Rights Movement. Clearly, SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, a civil rights group formed to give younger Blacks more of a voice in the Civil Rights Movement. As that movement became radical, it's clear that it had the influence of Malcolm X. In 1966, Stokely Carmichael was elected head of SNCC and popularized the term Black Power to categorize the new tactics and goals, including Black self-reliance and the use of violence as legitimate means of self-defense. He also drew attention to the plight of Blacks in the inner cities. Carmichael's successor, H. Rap Brown, went further, saying, "Violence is as American as cherry pie." H. Rap Brown later became known as the famous Imam Jamillah. Black Power was certainly a concept inspired by Malcolm X and the teachings of the nation, as was the concept of Black is beautiful. Nation of Islam teachings raised the level of Black consciousness and self-love that was unheard of. For example, consider how we named ourselves. The Nation of Islam came during a time when Black folk accepted the term Negro. It was the official name for Black people in the United States up to the 1960s. Even the legendary Black nationalist Mark Harvey used the term in the name of his organization, the Universal Negro Improvement Association. My father even told me that he grew up hearing his parents use the term colored to refer to Black folk. Malcolm X is one of our leaders most known for dropping the terms Negro and colored for Black. And for many of our people, Black was never seen as beautiful until Malcolm X unlocked the chains, conditioning us to think we were ugly and inferior. Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? These are Malcolm's fiery words. My mother told me the stories of how Malcolm X's words transformed her. When my mother was a little girl, after she played all day in the hot sun, she would spend hours in the tub, hoping to wash away the sun's mark. You can imagine then how liberating it was for her to read the autobiography of Malcolm X at 15. She said, "It was almost like my mind was being unshackled to know that Black was beautiful, that I'm beautiful, that kinky hair could be beautiful, thick lips could be beautiful. And it was wonderful because this was me." She heard the same message again at 19 when she visited a Nation of Islam temple. So the picture in the slide is my mom at 18, just before she joined the Nation of Islam. I want you to note her African head wrap. She's the one on the left. Again, she's wearing the African garment before her coming to Islam. And so we're going to revisit this picture and idea later. My mom explains that she explains why she found the Nation of Islam's message appealing. She said, "I want to go into something that would make me feel good about myself." And in the Nation, they said, the black man is God. With a big hearty laugh, my mom remembers her response as, wow, he is? So who exactly came up with this message that the black man was God? Was it Elijah Muhammad? And in general, who came up with Nation of Islam's teachings? Farad Muhammad was actually the founder of the Nation of Islam. And I'm going to read this excerpt from my book, Women of the Nation. The NOI finds its origins in 1930s Detroit. Wallace D. Farad Muhammad, its founder, remains something of an enigma in the history of African American Islam. For decades, scholars have contested Farad's origins, ethnicity, and the extent of his affiliations with Black nationalists and Islamic organizations in the United States. Farad was neither native to the United States nor of African descent. Recent research by Carl Evans and Fatima Fanusi suggests that he was of Pakistani origin. According to FBI surveillance, Farad entered the United States illegally in 1913. Farad's light-skinned complexion set him apart from the plethora of small-scale peddlers and African-American preachers in Detroit. Farad introduced himself to Detroit's African-American migrant community as a peddler. Soon after gaining the confidence of his customers, he began to censure Christianity and the Black church. Farad taught his customers that Islam was their true and natural religion, and that the Asiatic Black man was the God of the universe, and that Caucasians were blue-eyed devils created by evil scientist Yaqub on the island of Patmos. Farad's audiences grew rapidly in size. They were comprised of predominantly working-class migrants from the South who found their dreams of economic opportunity unfulfilled. Migrants were enthralled by Farad's critique of the U.S. racial hierarchy and his rhetorical attacks on Caucasians, whom he described as the natural enemy of Blacks. Farad's customers collectively financed the hiring of small halls and basements in order to accommodate all the migrants who proved eager to hear the peddler teach them about their natural religion. It was at this point that the NOI was born. So how did Elijah Muhammad meet Farad Muhammad? It was actually through his wife, who we now know today as Sister Clara Muhammad. When Elijah and Clara Poole migrated from rural Georgia to Detroit to escape the horrors of the South, they couldn't find jobs except for Clara's intermittent work as a domestic in white homes. Excuse me 1 second. They couldn't find work except sometimes she found work as a domestic in white homes, and she struggled at her own home. She had 5 young children, and her husband was unemployed, and he turned to alcohol. So one time, Sister Clara Muhammad was talking to one of her girlfriends, and she started to tell her the story about a man who was teaching African American people something very special, teaching them that they were a royal people. She said, "My girlfriend told me there's a man who's saying some things about our people, that we once dressed in long flowing cloth and we were royal." So when she heard this message about African Americans being royal, she thought of her husband first. So she and her husband attended one of the meetings led by Master Farad Muhammad, and that very day they accepted the teachings. Elijah Muhammad became an ardent follower of Farad and eventually succeeded Farad as the leader of the nation after he mysteriously disappeared in 1933. And then Elijah Muhammad taught his followers to be financially independent of whites and the government by pooling their resources and sustaining a separate, cohesive community. Do for self was his motto. So this means that Farad was the one who taught that the Asiatic Black man was the God of the universe and that Caucasians were blue-eyed devils. And although this was a myth, it was simply reversing the dominant religious ideology that God was a white man. The Nation of Islam also taught that, 1, Allah came down in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, and 2, that Elijah Muhammad was the messenger of Allah. I think what's really interesting to note about these teachings is the first part of Allah coming down in the person is a very Christian idea. It's the part of the theology that Christians believe that Jesus is God incarnate. It resembles that. And then the second part, interestingly, is Elijah Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. That's taking a very Islamic language. So did this apparently Pakistani man, who many actually believe had Ahmadiyya roots, did he actually state these things, that he was God in the person? These are important questions, and this type of questioning is what ultimately led the nation to Sunni Islam. So this is where our beloved Imam Warthi Muhammad, may Allah have mercy on him, comes in the picture. The son of Elijah Muhammad, Imam Muhammad, was then named Wallace. And there's a Nation of Islam legend that when Wallace's mother was pregnant with him, Sister Clara Muhammad, pregnant with him in 1933, before Farad disappeared, he predicted that her child would be a son, wrote the name Wallace on the back of a door in Elijah's home, and prophesied that he would be a helper to his father. And this legend was brought to life by the famous portrait in the slide, with one hand extending a Quran and the other hand placed firmly on the shoulder of his father, and Farad hovering above. The portrait supported the idea that Farad expected Wallace to one day teach the Quran. And, as you know, that's exactly what happened. Before Farad's disappearance, he established the University of Islam, really a private elementary school, which first started in Sister Clara Muhammad's home. And as the school grew, Elijah Muhammad insisted that they have Arabic teachers. And interestingly, Elijah's dedication to Arabic came from Farad. Shortly before Farad's disappearance, he gave Elijah 2 copies of the Quran, one with the Arabic text only and the other with Arabic and English. And Farad, he gave him the instruction to learn Arabic. So Wallace attended the University of Islam, and he advanced in Arabic studies through a Palestinian Arabic teacher named Jamillah Karim. And the teacher would also have private conversations with Wallace to use the Quran, to study the Quran for him, to use the Arabic, to study the Quran for himself, and also to think logically. And that was in the 1940s. Years later, when Wallace was a minister, he served time in prison for draft evasion between 1961 and 1963. And there in prison, he was better able to contemplate his own thoughts and closely analyze the Bible and Quran. He read both cover to cover, and he saw the error in his father's teachings and made up his mind to never teach the idea of Farad's divinity upon his return to the community. He shared his dissenting thoughts with close relatives, which led to his first suspension in 1964. His mother asked Wallace to go back to his father and accept his teachings, and he responded, "Mama, who did Mr. Farad tell you all he was? Did he tell you all he was God?" And she answered, "No." As we know, Wallace was not the only one dissenting at this time. There was also Elijah Muhammad. The controversy surrounding Elijah's relationships with several secretaries sparked Malcolm's dissent in 1963, and he also left the nation in 1964. An interesting thing to note is that when Imam Muhammad left the nation, he started an organization called the Afro-Descendant Upliftment Society. We also know that Malcolm X in 1965, so in the following year, I believe when he came back from the Hajj, he started the organization of Afro-American Unity. So talking about names earlier, it's interesting the way that both of them are incorporating the African reference in our naming. Warthi Muhammad eventually was brought back into the community, and particularly after the assassination of Malcolm X, we theorized that for his safety, it was important for him to do so. So Farad Muhammad never said he was God in the person. And in a moment, we'll come back to the question of how then the nation theology developed. First, I want to return to my family's narrative to show that the Nation of Islam continued strong for 10 years after Malcolm's death, 10 years with Elijah Muhammad. So my parents, both of them joined the nation in 1971. My mother's from Washington, D.C. My dad from Atlanta, as you know, but he went to Howard University to complete his bachelor's. And I consider myself a daughter of the nation. I was never in it. I was born in 1976. By that time, they had gone into Sunni Islam. But of course, their history is one that I celebrate and write about and teach about. So I've shared a little bit about my mother's story. Now I want to share my father's story. And I'm going to do that with an audio. I'll begin with the audio clip. So if you can play the audio clip now. Thank you. This is my father's voice.
People walk from MLK up to Crawford Line and Miles and Solomon. Chestnut Street. So Allah put me in that bookstore, and as far as I'm concerned, that's where it started. And I'm reading all these books by Du Bois and all these books. Ronald Siegel had a book called Race War, and James Baldwin, Souls of Black Folks, and James Baldwin, The Far Next Time, and one of the greatest books that I read was Frantz Fanon, Wretched of the Earth, Black Skin, White Mask. But one of the main ones was W.B. Du Bois, Africa in the World, or something like that. But it was just countless books. And that's where it started. And then we had a great leader, of course, who used to be with SNCC, named Bill Ware. And I called him Namansa. I named him Namansa. He was really like our leader. I was the leader, but he was my leader. He was older. He used to be with SNCC, with H. Rap Brown and Stokely Carmichael and all of them. And I called him Namansa. That's how much respect I had for him, like Mansa Musa. And so we just got involved with that. We had a freedom school. We had an organization called Black Consciousness Movement. And I was the leader of the Black Consciousness Movement. And I used to speak over there in Morehouse and different places. And we started a freedom school in a little place called the Canterbury House. And we had a program. Daddy came to that program. We had a little I guess you could call it where we invited people and they came to see the children, and we had them doing different things and everything. And so I read the book about Chaka Zulu, and I stopped calling myself Harvey and started calling myself Brother Chaka. So that's when they call me Brother Chaka, like Chaka Zulu. So when I you hear me?
Yes.
So when I went to Washington D.C., going to Howard University, when I first went to Temple number 4, where I met your mother, when I signed in as Brother Chaka. But at Morehouse, I was the head of the Black Consciousness Movement, and we did a lot of demonstrating. This white teacher over at Spelman called his sister from Detroit a jackass in the class. And we marshaled our forces, and his brother Sam Etheridge, who was our artist, he made up a flyer, and we had a black man kicking a white lady out, and we went over to her class at Spelman in the Fine Arts Building, and we told her that was her last day. We went in her class and interrupted her class and told that white lady, this is your last day. And then me and another brother, because by that time I was calling myself Kwame. It was a name from Ghana, certain tribe like Kwame, Kwesi, Kwaku. They had certain names for men if you were born on a certain day of the week. So I took a name. When I finally finished with my name, it was Muhammad. Some people say Kwasi, but my name was Muhammad Kwesi Chaka Lumumba. That was the name that I had put together. Kwesi. Yeah, Muhammad. That was the first part of my name. Muhammad Kwesi Chaka Lumumba. So we kicked her out. She never came back to Spelman. And then we did some things over in Morehouse, and they wanted me to come before the Morehouse group of board of trustees or something like that. And they wanted me to come before them. They wanted to kind of like try me, and like they wanted me to.
Was first speaking, or he's talking about his time at Morehouse. He started at Morehouse College. He was head of the Black Consciousness movement there because of his radical acts. He was expelled from Morehouse, and that's when he then went to Howard, where he met my mom. And then I just wanted to look at this picture again of my mom. My mom, she's in college too, and she took on an African name as well, Utamu, which means sweetness. So I think it's really great how they both took on African names and consciousness before they joined the Nation of Islam. So let's move quickly. You're gonna have to skip that. So my father, he becomes a minister in 1975. Notice his name is Minister Ahmed Karim. This is the moment of transition when Imam Warfi Muhammad is making that transition. Immediately, he removes the teachings that Masorat came down in the person of, or that God came down in the person of Masorat. And so, and he introduced the Prophet Muhammad. And here, by this time, he had given my father a new name, Ahmed Karim. Still, he has the minister. So during the transition, like gradually, they're changing many of the symbols. So immediately, Imam Muhammad corrects the teachings, but the movement from like calling the temples mosque or the ministers imams, that happened gradually, but by 1977, all of that had been changed. Here's a picture of Imam Muhammad on Jet magazine, influential magazine in the Black community, again, just to show how this is part of Black history. So back to the question of, the prophecy, or really about the teaching. So what Imam Muhammad did, which was very wise, was that he did not blatantly disrespect his father, or he showed respect to him and Masorat Muhammad. So when he basically essentially explained how his father was coming from a biblical mentality, which he certainly was. His father was a pastor, so he was coming from a Christian background. So he imagined these things into Masorat, that he was God incarnate. And I do a better job of explaining that in the book. So I just encourage you to read the book since we're running out of time. But essentially, Imam Muhammad felt that his father was sincere. And so I wanted to end with a story. I've shared this story before, like through my blog, or another place. Some of you are familiar with it. But I wanted to highlight this part about Anna Karim to show how Imam Muhammad's transition, what it's most noted for, of course, is bringing the correct teachings. Also, we should know that he was very progressive in his gender ideology, and right away he made changes to advance women in the organization. And one of the ways he did that immediately, or I should say in the community, the way he did that immediately was he appointed a woman as the editor of the Muhammad Speaks newspaper. And this one was Anna Karim, pictured here in 1975. Just want to quickly say this is really significant too. Another part of the way that this is part, that the nation's story is part of the larger Black history story, is that there was a Black press that was very vibrant in the 1950s, 60s, that would tell about the injustices happening to African Americans. And even before the nation started its own newspaper, it regularly ran columns of Elijah Muhammad in Black newspapers. And so Malcolm X started the newspaper Muhammad Speaks in 1960. By 1968, the nation had its own newspaper plant. And this, I'm really happy to mention this too, because I didn't emphasize it, but the Nation of Islam really did carry out its philosophy of do for self. And the Nation of Islam is known for a host of businesses, this plant being one, but even the way that we have the temples were mosques, why we have Warthi Muhammad mosques across the nation, because they were temples established and businesses associated with those temples in schools, while we have Sister Muhammad schools where it had them all across the nation. So this is Anna Karim. I tell the story about how she actually did SNCC work in Lowndes County, Alabama, right outside of Montgomery. And that's how Elijah Muhammad knew of her. Elijah Muhammad actually invited her to the Nation of Islam because he saw newspaper clippings of her and other students being beaten by the police. So a rare thing that she was invited by Elijah Muhammad, and she became a part of his staff. And then later, Imam Muhammad again saw her talent and had her to be the editor. I really hope you get a chance to read her story fully. So I want to end with something very special and fun. And so it's bring up that clip. So here we have a scene from the great movie Hidden Figures, another one you have to see if you haven't seen it, about the way that these Black women played a vital part in the space program getting men to the moon. So I want you to notice that this scene, how much it looks like this picture of Sister Muhammad, one of her daughters, in front of Nation Women, a famous picture by Gordon Parks, who took a lot of pictures in the civil rights movement. So it's clear, we know for certain that this scene in the film was actually inspired by the Nation of Islam picture that Gordon Parks took. So to finally conclude on this note of women, I want to conclude that I want to share this to say that, again, you cannot tell Black history without telling American Muslim history, and you cannot tell either history without women. And so it's lastly to end with my family history. So this is a scene again in Hidden Figures, and this scene is in my granny's house. So my grandfather sold the house in 2015, and the house was put on the movie market, I guess. And then the Hidden Figures picked up the film, and they selected my granny's house, and so now it's in the movie. So through Granny's house, my rich family history is forever preserved in one of the most celebrated films in Black history, and the Nation of Islam inspired one of its most powerful scenes. Thank you. One more picture.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much, Dr. Jamillah, for that beautiful presentation. We were very captivated the entire time, and you've been incredibly insightful, subhanAllah. So for everyone who is here and will be joining us, Auntie Tamara is here, so I'll let her continue. Thank you for joining us, Auntie Tamara. Auntie Tamara, I believe you're muted. Sorry to interrupt.
Oops, I'm supposed to know about that. I was saying thank you very, very much for coming on this morning and sharing with us. It was incredibly enlightening, incredibly educational, and I'm so pleased and grateful that you're able to be here. We have Zenobia. Oh, there she goes. So I hope that those of you who were able to attend today I know that you feel as I do, and this has been recorded, so we will be sharing this on our Rabata channel, and we hope that it gets a lot of shares and a lot of views, because I think really the tying together of Black history and Muslim history, and really teaching us how important it is that all of these things come together to teach us our history, really, It was really very important for all of us. And so thank you very much for honoring us with your presence. And for everybody, I'll make a couple of really quick announcements before you all fall off or drop off or whatever word you want to use. We have, if you are in Ohio or nearby, we'll be having a teen camp this summer. It's our first U.S. teen camp. And we're just doing save the date right now. We don't have registration open yet, but just so you know. Also, our Rabata retreat, we also want you to save the date for that. Admin, can we get the flyers up for those things? And very importantly, there's a Facebook Live on Valentine's Day. That's Thursday, February 14th, where I will be with Sheikh Hamdi bin Isa. I think I just said his name wrong. And Ustaza Shahnaz and Brother Ali and Ustaza Fatiha. And we will all be at Daybreak Live. If you're in Minnesota, come over there and watch us. Otherwise, watch us on Facebook Live, where we celebrate love and celebrate the beloved, the Prophet ﷺ, with an announcement for the winners of the Letters to the Beloved contest. That's going to be super fun. Definitely be there if you can be. Also, another announcement is that we will be launching our book, Kanya Makan, the Stories and Recipes of Syria. We're going to be honoring the legacy of Syria as a uniting country that united peoples and continues to try to do so in Virginia. We will be there launching this book, which was actually written by a woman who died during the war. She was writing it during the war, and it's a collection of folk tales that really show both how Syria itself and its different cultures in Syria are united, and also how we are all united together, as these stories really prove that we all have kind of similar stories. So that will be in Virginia, and that's also a save the date. And what else we got going on, ladies? My brain has... all right, there you go. There's some save the dates, the annual Rabata retreat. This year we will be in a new place in Abiquiu, New Mexico. And because we're going to be there where it's so beautiful and it looks like Mecca, something like Mecca, we are going to, the theme will be Sira. We have our new Sira book. We're going to be talking about Sira. It's going to be amazing. And also the teen camp, and we will also have an Isra that we're also collaborating with Muslim Youth of North America to present 8 weeks of Aqidah for teen girls. I'll be doing that, and we're really looking forward to that, and excited for the collaboration and excited to spread our wings to work with youth online. Alhamdulillah. And I think those are the announcements that I wanted to say. And thank you again for being here. And the retreat dates, they were under the Isra one. They are July. Oh, also one more last one I'm going to say. Here's the retreat dates, July 25th to the 29th. One more thing. We will be doing the Growing Hope Tour again this year. We'll be going far west, California and down, then back up through Phoenix, inshallah. We don't have yet our exact places that we're going. So if you are in that general area, you can email programs@rabata.org so you can get on our list. We've had a great time in the past years doing the Growing Hope Tour. Really, really wonderful to meet women across the United States as we sing and celebrate the hope that we find in Islam. And the last announcement, I can't believe I forgot this one, is an answer to all of your questions, because you know you're asking it. We're all asking it. I get this question 100 times a month. Is my period over? And so if you have ever in your life wondered, is my period over? Join us on February 16th, where we will have women scholars from the 4 Sunni madhabs talking to you and answering you and discussing and answering the question. And literally the whole day is my period over? We're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to find ways to discover. We're going to make it so that we no longer have the stress moment every month that says, is my period over or not? So instead it will be a lovely experience of moving smoothly from one spiritual experience into another, from the experience of dhikr to the experience of salah. All right. Thank you very much again, and thanks for sticking around for the announcements, folks. And I had a wonderful time this morning, and I hope you really will join us again, Dr. Jamillah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.